I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
7.5 years ago, I got thyroid cancer, and the average life expectancy of somebody in my situation was 14 months.
So let's look at like a best case scenario. You're looking at a maximum of 3 years.
That's about right, yeah.
When you first realized the full depth of what was happening, what was your first reaction?
Immediately, everybody became very important to me. Immediately, time became super important to me. The desire to connect with the meaning overwhelmed the time I had for the meaningless. You know, life is just way too short to get paid to hang out with people you don't like.
Can they ever make like, I don't know, robots the size of cells that just go through and find all the cells and patch them up?
I mean, that's the science fiction, you know, the nanotech stuff. I don't know, you know, they're anywhere close to doing something like that. One thing that people always say to me is, you know, I can't imagine what it would be like to go through what you're going through. And to what I always say to them, neither can I. Like, my brain can't fathom it any more than your brain can. It's just this fact that is unimaginable.
So about a year or so ago, I had on this podcast a very good friend of mine, and he was diagnosed at that time with terminal cancer. We had been talking the day before, and his outlook on life was so amazing to me, and his perspective, knowing that he had limited time left on the planet. And I said, come on the podcast tomorrow. And he did. And we were able to really have a frank discussion about what it means when you know you're going to die very soon. We all know we're going to die, but he knew specifically that his time was shorter than most. And it just changed his entire perspective on life. And there was just so much wisdom in that podcast. I was amazed, and we got a lot of great feedback. But sadly, I heard this morning that he passed away. I knew he was getting more and more sick. He was, for a while, every single experimental medication was working. Like, they would say to him, oh, this experimental medication will work for 6 months. And hopefully there'll be a new one ready that you can try in 6 months. And it would work for 6 months. And, you know, lo and behold, another experimental medication would be ready, and it would work for another 6 months. And he kept extending his time. And I even said to him, are you worried you're going to live forever now because you prepared yourself so much for everything? But anyway, a few months ago, the last experimental medication had kind of run its course, and there was nothing left for him to try, and he was in a lot of pain. So he went into essentially a hospice and started taking care of himself in other ways than just taking medication. And this morning I got the news that unfortunately this friend of mine has passed away. But I'm reminded of just the amazing knowledge and wisdom he shared with us and with me on this podcast. So we're going to re-air it. And Mike, we had so good getting to know you. I've got on the show a very special guest, Mike Van Cleave. Mike, how's it going?
It's going very well, thank you.
So, Mike, I would think it's fair to say 20 years ago, we were probably like best friends.
That's definitely true, yes.
We used to go to comedy clubs together. We worked together. We'd play chess together literally every single day for years.
Yes,
This is probably like a 3-year period.
something like that, yeah.
We went to Aspen, the Aspen Comedy Festival, probably traveled around other places. I can't remember other places. But we lost touch as these things go. We got back in touch a year ago, and we're talking and talking and talking. And then you were like, oh, that's right. You don't know. I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Yeah,
And this was just about a year ago, maybe less than a year ago.
it was 9 months ago, it's in February.
Yeah, 9 months ago. And when they first diagnosed you, correct me if I'm wrong, you were given a few months to live or 6 months to live.
Well, they were unclear about it, because there's just a tremendous amount of ambiguity with cancer. I mean, what I did know was the average life expectancy of somebody in my situation was 14 months.
What kind of cancer was it?
It is, so it was actually 7.5 years ago, I got thyroid cancer, and 99% of the cases is beatable. And so
It's like Barbara Bush got thyroid cancer, right?
I actually don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
It's fairly common, actually, as far as cancers go.
When you first realized the full potential outcome and depth of what was happening, what was your first reaction?
Literally, my first reaction was I thought of all the people I wanted to see, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to see them. And so, going
Because there were so many people?
Yeah, and actually going just slightly back when you were asking what did they tell me, at one point I said to the doctor when she just said, well, you already understand it. And I said, well, can you give me a sense, 6 months, 12 months, or, should I keep working? Should I, do this other stuff? And she said, I can tell you this. I would strongly try to enjoy the next 6 months of your life. And that was really the strongest thing that she said at that stage. But again, that matched up with the numbers. And so I knew that, if untreated, it would get, the end that I just described would still happen no matter what. So I already knew that. And so then I was just like, how could I see, every person who was important to me? And so what I ended up doing was I went through my social media accounts, and I went through my email, every email I'd ever sent, that I could find, really every email since Gmail, and then emailed every person in my life that I had their contact information to, and said, I'm having a party, and I'd really like you to come to this party, and it's okay if you can't, but here's what's going on.
And you didn't explain the reason for the party?
Oh, no, I explained to everybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that was a very shocking letter for a lot of people to get, and it was in January in France, in the countryside, and I thought maybe 20 people would show up. And then it was really, really overwhelming because almost 200 people came to the party. And they flew in from all over the world. My best friend from junior high, who I hadn't spoken to in over 20 years, showed up. It was just really amazing.
And so what did you do? Did you quit your job?
Oh, yeah, no, I quit my job.
You quit your job instantly, like the next day?
Pretty much, yeah.
So
it took a little bit. I was working in a startup at that stage, and I was.
But there's no more dreams of like, oh, the startup's going to work out, and I'm going to get wealthy for the next 30 years.
No, I don't care.
Right. So suddenly,
in fact, I still own shares in that company. I had a conversation with the current CEO, and he was talking about buying me out or not buying me out or, keeping me on. And I was just like, I don't care. I mean, like whatever you want to do, I'll sell you the shares. I won't show you the shares. You tell me. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I don't have kids. Don't anticipate having kids. So what do I care? It'll just be, my goal is to die with $5 in my bank account.
Right. And I mean, I'm having trouble coming up with a question, actually. So you have this party. You're being you think you have no idea how long you're going to live. At that point, probably when you have the party, you don't know which treatments are going to work for how long. And did you get scared? Were you more scared or sad?
Numb.
Because what sounds scary is not so much the death, but correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't been through this. What sounds scary is not so much the death, but the pain of the death. But what sounds sad is the not seeing people you want to see.
That was my overwhelming feeling before the party, and then after the party, I saw everybody.
But like, for instance, I think of life and I think, okay, I'm 49. There's still a whole potential second half to my life. Mm-hmm. Anything could happen. It could even be more kids, or there could be more jobs, more opportunities, more things to be creative about. What did you specifically stop thinking about or stop hoping for or stop being anxious about?
Well, I mean, that process was slow. The first couple months before the party, I just became a complete mess. And it was really just
What does
shock.
that mean?
I mean, well, I was drinking too much. I was, not doing anything, just partying, trying to, just figure stuff out, talking a lot, crying a lot. I can always tell over the years if I'm going through a really tough time if I cry while I'm watching Modern Family. And I don't know what it is. Every once in a while, Modern Family, I'm just like, oh, Phil loves Claire so much. And I just can't stop crying, which I always think it's funny. That's the one show that makes me cry sometimes. But so I just kind of this mess. And I really don't remember that stage very well, honestly. I was just completely in shock. And, one thing that people always say to me is, I can't imagine what it would be like, to go through what you're going through. And to what I always say to them, neither can I. Like my brain can't fathom it any more than your brain can. And so it's just like this, it's just this fact that is unimaginable.
I feel like there's this other cliche too, which is that, we're all going to die eventually. You just happen to have a little more clarity on when it's going to happen. Like I could go outside today and get hit by a car. But the reality is, if you've lived, let's say I've lived 2,500 weeks so far, the odds are pretty good I'm going to live another one. Right. I have no reason to think I'm not going to live another week or month or year or whatever. The statistics are sort of on my side to live forever, actually, and then eventually I'll die.
Right, eventually you won't live forever.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of good until it isn't.
Right.
But you, unlike me or unlike most people walking around, have kind of this window into how many months, years, and what will happen during those months and years and so on. So like specifically like what joys do you think what were the first joys you think you realized you would miss? So obviously the friends were one, but you kind of not solved it, but
actually I understand the question, and I don't know how to answer it because that wasn't my experience. So I
don't know. So what was your experience?
So I wasn't all of a sudden worried about kind of what I would miss. I worried about who I would miss. And eventually, immediately everybody became very important to me. Immediately time became super important to me.
Oh, well, I want to ask this. So if everybody became important to you, who didn't become important to you? You say everyone, but I'm sure not everyone. I'm sure some people actually reduced in importance.
It's very polar now.
Yeah.
No, actually, if they were important to me, it's very hard for me to not hold on to people in the past who are important. Like whatever, thing that we had that caused us to quit talking. When I was in New York and saw you show up in my social media, I was just like, why wouldn't I talk to that guy? He was a hugely important part of my life. Right. And I don't remember what it was that we did, actually you told me what you thought it was, and I thought it was something else. And so like there was just some stupid thing, and that no longer mattered at all. And whether you had done this or done that, or I'd done this or I'd done that, just didn't matter at all anymore. The relationship all of a sudden became the most important thing.
Right. The fact that there was meaning.
There was meaning.
And what relationships did you find that were even current for you? Did you realize had no meaning, and so you dropped them?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely, it wasn't as binary as that, because it was more that the desire to connect with the meaning overwhelmed the time I had for the meaningless.
Instead of thinking what you're going to miss or what anxieties you're going to get rid of, you just focused on today. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I'll let you continue. I'm just trying to understand it. Today, how can I add to the meaning in my life today, or what will provide meaning today?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it not, yes, meaning. I mean, the semantics get challenging at some point, but it's like what's important. You know, what do I want to do? I remember very clearly early on when, I mean, in the beginning, I really thought, no more than a year and a half, maybe 2 at the outside. And I remember I was really tired one Friday night, and I thought to myself, you have 50 to 75 Fridays left. Like, how could you just sit here? Like, I don't want to spend one of my 50 Friday nights sitting around feeling bad for myself. I'm going to do something. I don't know what, but I'm going to go find something that's better than what I'm currently doing.
Do you remember what you did that night?
I'm sure I went over to a bar and flirted with somebody. I mean, it's funny. And I've mentioned this to you before, but what I really came away with, and this is cliche, and it's funny. I used to there was a bunch of things I think I figured out that I really wanted to share with people, and at some point I realized, in some ways, you can't understand it until you understand it, and it's a little bit like talking to a child. Well, by the way, that totally didn't mean that condescendingly.
No, you could condescend.
But but I mean, like, in the sense that, like, somebody, like your first great heartbreak. Everybody's like, it's okay, you'll survive. There'll be another one. But you can't imagine what it would be like because you've never had that happen to you. And so at a certain point, I realized it's a similar thing. It's not that I have a better perspective. I just have a different vantage point that's really hard to understand or to really process, I think. And the one thing that I've come to understand completely is there's only one thing in your life that matters, and that's the quality of your relationships. And it's such a cliche. You can look back at thousands of quotes of people who are old and dying, and they always talk about the people in their lives. Nobody cares about how much money you have when you die. It just doesn't matter. And so most of the things that we sit around, spending our life in, worrying about, you realize at this stage has no meaning. Now, it's important, maybe. It's important that I have a job because I got to pay money. I got to spend money. I got to live. But the job itself only has the importance that you place in it. There's no fundamental intrinsic importance to that. And I was talking to a friend of mine, girlfriend, now fiance, when I first met her, first time I'd ever met her, a really old dear friend of mine, and she came to Paris, and she's a psychologist, and she said, and this was right after I learned. I mean, he got on a plane within a week or two of my learning, and his girlfriend was very negative, and she was like, hey, Mike, is there anything positive? I mean, I know it's a weird question, but is there, any goodness that's come out of this? And I said, well, yeah. I mean, the one thing I realized is that the only thing that matters in life is relationships. And then, we talked about that for a moment. And then about an hour, 2 hours later, it had actually gone inside. We're at a cafe, and she said, earlier I heard you say that what's most important to you is the relationships in your life. And I just met her, so I couldn't say anything. I didn't think I could say anything, but I really got annoyed with her because I was like, no, I most certainly did not say that. I did not say what's important to me. I said it's very clear to me that this is the only thing that's important. And it's funny, I keep having these conversations with people all the time, and people kind of are like, yeah, that makes sense. But it doesn't really register because you just behave differently if your relationships are the most important thing in your life.
Well, it's interesting because I do kind of think, I mean, I was just on someone else's podcast earlier this morning, and they were asking, like, well, how it was all like success this, success that. But I said it really does, even success boils down to the quality of the relationships in your life. Like, if you have 20 good let's say you have 20 good people in your company and one bad person, your company is going to go down the tubes. So
Right.
like a 20-to-1 ratio. You need like everybody to be pretty good, or at least 50 to be good and one to be bad to counterbalance it.
Right.
And so I do think that is like a truism, but I think maybe to let's try to be devil's advocate for a second. Clearly, if you have like a bunch of kids that you have to pay for, and a wife, you have to pay for their survival after you're dead. And if the wife has been raising the kids, you have to think about them a little bit.
Right, but
I know you have to think
I would
about
argue
money.
that is about the quality of the relationship.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a crappy relationship with them, you don't care about the relationship, you just don't take care of them after you're dead.
And here's another one, and this is going to sound odd, but you have to also take care of your health. So you have to take care of every other aspect of your health. Like you have to eat well and sleep well.
I'm very clearly not saying that's the only thing
Right.
that, well, actually, maybe I did say that, but I'm not saying that the other things aren't important. I'm saying that the quality of your relationships is most important.
Right, because if you spend any time, like if you take one of your 50 Fridays left, if you spend that Friday with someone you didn't really want to spend that time with, why would you? It almost makes zero sense when you put the math to it.
And the thing is, I'd also say that, like, and I'm not just blowing air up your skirt, but like, I know that you know this, and that's what I'm saying is that I find that it's challenging to teach this, because if you know it, and it's obvious, and if you don't, you don't. But like, if I read your blog, like half of the things that you talk about are all about relationships, even if they don't say they're about relationships. Be an idea machine. Think of somebody and send them ideas. That's clearly, I'm building a relationship with you. And that's, every successful person I know says that. Every happy person I know says that. Every unhappy, unsuccessful person I know thinks it's something other than relationships, or they're just really bad at relationships. There was the Harvard study, I can't remember the name of the title, but the longitudinal study that started in the 30s and is still going, the largest study ever done on people. And so, like Kennedy was in that class, like a whole bunch of really famous people were in that class. But what was interesting is that over the kind of 70 years the study's been going on, they came up with 3 things that are the largest indicators of all positive metrics in your life: happiness, success, financial stability, health. And the 3 strongest variables in that were, in this order: smoking, drinking, and the quality of your relationships.
I don't understand. What's the smoking and the drinking part?
Well, smoking and drinking are massively negatively correlated.
Oh, I see.
And so smokers, it turns out, earlier in life, and drinkers, really happy. Things are going great. Woo! But by the time you're 60 or 70, you pay the piper for that. Which is good news, because I'm not going to live to 60 or 70, so I'm not going to have to pay the piper.
We don't know for sure, but
I know,
if there's a new drug coming out.
Exactly. We'll cross our fingers. But the people who had the highest quality relationships were the ones who were the happiest, the healthiest, lived the longest. And incidentally, the people who were the happiest, this is around 1970 to 1980 because of the age of that cohort, the people who were happiest, had the best relationships, made on average $250,000 a year more than the people who had lower quality relationships.
Could there be a causal thing there, that people who make more somehow attract more friends? I'm just wondering the statistics.
Obviously, this is correlation, not causal.
Yeah. Clearly, it's the quality of the relationships have to be important.
Right.
Does it help to have a lot of high quality relationships, or does that not matter as much?
I say this a lot. Time is your only non-replaceable resource. So, it takes a huge amount of time to build anything of really high quality. And so you got to play a balance in it. I can't have 1,000 friends. I can have 1,000 acquaintances, but those are not really necessarily very high quality. Now, I can still try to have the highest quality acquaintances, but if I tried to have 200 close friends, then I would have no close friends.
Right.
And so there is some balance in there. And I don't really know the statistics. I know it's been studied. I think you can have like no more than 4 or 5 close friends and, 20, like 4 or 5 really close friends and maybe 20 close friends and, 100 acquaintances or something in that effect. That's the total amount that.
Yeah. You
that
ever
we can
hear
handle.
something called the Dunbar number?
No.
So it's, you can basically have 150 people that you I don't know if it's acquaintances or that you know enough about that you can consider an acquaintance.
Exactly.
And so if you don't have that in your life, then what happens is, which many people don't actually, what happens is then that's where People Magazine and Us Magazine, all these things come in. You think Kim Kardashian, the brain thinks Kim Kardashian's your friend because you're seeing her every day.
James, are you suggesting that Kim Kardashian is not my friend?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. You've been fooling yourself all this time, inviting her to France.
That's
and
really upsetting.
It's no wonder she's not responded to you.
No, she hasn't. I thought maybe
she's just busy.
It was getting lost in the mail or something.
Right. So I mean, what do you do then? Like sitting here listening to this, what do you suggest to people? Let's say you're invited to a dinner and you don't really feel like going. What do you do?
I make a determination between my time and my commitment to that relationship. It's just it's a. I mean, I don't want to say it's just mathematical, but it's a fairly simple.
But you can make that
calculation.
mathematical calculation. Let's say someone doesn't know how many. I mean, it almost sounds like too crude to think of it mathematically. But let's say someone doesn't know how much time they have, but they could potentially be seeing this person a lot more. Let's say it's a boss that they don't want to, do this with or that with. What would the solution be? I'm asking you like an oracle of Delphi here.
I mean, again, I think, sometimes for me, I mean, of course, I don't work anymore. It's really, I mean, it's so strange.
I didn't mean like the work connotation.
No, I understand.
Let's say if, let's say a girl that's
exactly.
making you
I was
uncomfortable.
just to switch the context. But like, if say for example, as you know, this has happened recently, that I met somebody that seemed really interesting to me, and I thought that there might be something, I would invest a tremendous amount of time and energy in a short period of time to find out whether that was going to mean something, whether it was going to be meaningful. And then if it isn't, then, I'm going to react differently. So it's kind of, if it was a boss, and it was important, I would probably do it. At the same time, I probably wouldn't work for somebody I really didn't want to spend time with anymore.
Right.
Life is just way too short to get paid to hang out with people you don't like.
Now, when you first found out about the diagnosis, you weren't in a romantic relationship?
Nope.
So did that make you sad, the fact that there wasn't somebody who was kind of almost by definition would stick through it with you for that duration? Did you feel sad about that?
That's very complicated. There's no easy answer to that. There's parts of it that I've gone through really different periods of it too. There's parts of the time when I'm actually happy in a weird way not to be in that relationship. I don't have near the emotional and physical reserves I did prior to being on the medication. So I don't really know. I have 6 plants in my apartment from 3 years ago, and I think one of them may be doing okay. 3 of them are just dead in their pots. I haven't even bothered to throw them out. So like I can't care for any living thing right now.
Why do the emotional reserves go down? Because of the actual emotional duress of the situation, or is there a medical reason the emotional reserves go down?
A little bit of both. I mean, the emotional reserves just go down because I'm tired. I only have a few hours a day where I feel really good. It varies from time to time. But about a year and a half ago, I left my apartment about 6 hours a week, and the rest of the time I was just at home on the sofa. And when people would come visit me after about an hour, I'd be just happy for them to go. And so at those moments, I really just didn't have a lot of energy to give to people.
And was that the tail end of one of the drug protocols?
That was actually the beginning of one of the drug protocols where they had me on the maximum dosage, and I was reacting very poorly to it.
I see there were side effects.
Yeah, and so they kept lowering the dose until I was fine.
What about in terms of like starting new? Like obviously relationships are important. Romantic relationships are part of relationships. Do you consider starting new ones, knowing that, and how do people react to you, knowing that there's kind of a timeline on the romantic relationship?
It's challenging. I've recently had my kind of thinking knocked out of balance on that. I think that I was overestimating the impact of my illness on it. But there's no doubt that it's a big decision to get involved with somebody who you know how it's going to end. and you know that there's going to be a really difficult period of time. And so I find that it has to be certain people at certain places are going to want to be consider that, and other people just aren't. And I really do understand. It's not. It's also very challenging early on in dating because if I don't tell you that I'm sick, then I actually have to hide a lot from you. And I think life's too short to lie and pretend to be something that you're not. And so I want to tell you because I want you to know me, and it's such a big part of my life. But on a first date, let me just mention to you, stage 4 metastatic cancer. And now, you have an hour and a half conversation because it takes about an hour and a half to work through this the first time when somebody learns it. And I actually, I've told more than 300 people in person at some point about this, and I know almost exactly how the conversation's going to go, and it really does. It takes 45 minutes to 90 minutes, no matter what, to get through all the questions and the initial shock, and that's just horrible first date conversation. But now, if you wait to the sixth date, well, this is really awkward because the person's like, I might wanted to have known that. Actually, that seems like useful information for me.
Right.
And
so have you gone to the sixth date?
No, actually, of course not. Because I overshare. So sometime in the first 2 dates, I tell them, and then they
seems like it would be hard to even last till the second date before.
It's really hard. Yeah, one of my friends is always just like, dude, just don't tell them. And I'm like, but I want to tell them.
Right.
That's who I am.
And so what else has changed? Obviously, you quit your job. Kind of hang out in France.
You
spend time with your family's in Colorado, I know, right? Or Kentucky?
Kentucky. Well, they have 2 houses, so they're either in Kentucky or Colorado. They've been in Kentucky for a while, so yeah.
Do you spend as much time as possible with them? I mean, you're living in France, so why don't you spend all your time with them?
Well, one of the major reasons is because of French healthcare. I don't think I could get the healthcare that I have in France in the U.S. There's certainly no private insurance that I'm aware of that would cover the quality of healthcare that I have.
Are there any kind of rogue countries that don't? I mean, like the FDA, the EMA, most of these drug administrations around the world kind of all work together. Are there any kind of rogue countries where just any drug is on the market and you could try the most experimental things possible?
Probably, but I wouldn't want to do it. I mean, it's funny. I so often I talk. Everybody I talk to, not everybody. It's gross exaggeration. Many times I'm talking to somebody and they come up with raw almonds. That's a secret. You just got to eat raw almonds, and or I don't know what it is.
Does any of that stuff ever work? Like, for instance, I do have one friend who says this is part of the whole no carb thing. Carbs cause inflammation. That causes the cancer cells to replicate. Just stop immediately. Put your brain in ketosis and all carbs gone. Is there any truth to any of that?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I don't think so. What causes cancer is, it's just a random defect. And so now I think you can make you could make theoretically a strong argument that a certain lifestyle or food choice would actually increase the likelihood of that genetic failure occurring. But once the failure's occurred, it's just simple chemistry at that stage. And so it's
you can't starve the cancer cells of a particular nutrient that they need.
No, because the thing is, the cancer cells are just slightly unhealthy cells. I mean, they're just, the only thing that's wrong with them is that they are not supposed to be there. But these are thyroid cells in my body, and so they're just thyroids. And so they're, the body can't tell the difference between those thyroids as healthy thyroid cells and non-healthy thyroid cells.
By the way, if you have all these many thyroids, do they generate hormones or no? That part they don't.
Well, that's what I say they do. That's the cancer marker, is that they measure the thyroglobulin, which is the thyroid hormone I don't take because it's not used. And so they can see how much the thyroids are producing.
But are they also producing testosterone or anything like that?
No, because they only produce T1, T2, and T3 hormones.
But those go into the pituitary gland, you said, and potentially produce these other hormones, or no?
Well, the thing is that's actually on so these are all building blocks. And so really what you have to have, for the most part, is just enough of them around that your body can convert them into what it needs to. So it's more of a thresholding thing. It is possible to be hyperthyroidal, but you have to have a lot extra to become hyperthyroidal. And I mean, the total mass of these things is very small. I mean, all the tumors is much smaller than the original thyroid was. So, it's a fairly insignificant amount that it's adding.
But it's significant enough that it'll kill you?
No. What kills you is, as I said, is that it'll either be the brain, and that it actually, grows into parts of the brain and destroys function of the brain, because it's actually just,
Right.
compressing the brain and
Right.
shutting off, and stealing vascularization from the brain. That's one of the big things that the cancer does, is that, these cells have no vascularization. I mean, there's no arteries going to them or anything. So part of what happens in the genetic modification is they're able to glom onto something, and then they steal the nutrients from that thing. And so the parasitic part of it is actually what kills you in that case. Or the other case is bone failure, which then they just keep growing in the bones and break the bones, and then, spine collapses.
So what are you going to do? What do you think? I'm sure you've pictured this. Once the final thing looks like it's not working and the doctors are sort of like shrugging their shoulders and looking around at each other, what are you going to do then?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm not. I mean, it's one of the major differences in the way I live my life now versus pre-cancer is literally I can't predict anything more than 90 days out. And my brain actually just doesn't engage in that kind of behavior anymore. It's just when I think about something 6 months out, it's just a gray wall, because so many times through a change in medication or something not working, I don't know from month to month how I'm going to feel.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. the future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
So I wonder if this is applicable at all in let's say normal, quote unquote, normal life. Is that, we none of us really know 6 months out what's going to happen, and yet we do have to. Like, I have to plan 6 months out. I have to plan a year out. I have kids growing up and stuff like that. I guess I have to think about it, but maybe there's a way I think about it with too much anxiety sometimes, or I don't know. I'm wondering.
Yeah,
Now that I'm trying to pick apart this for my lessons, but
No, I think that's great. I think you. I mean, I think if you're really honest with yourself and you look back over your life, you'll probably realize that your 1 year, 5 year, and 10-year plan was almost never more than 10% accurate.
right, or less, much less.
Exactly. And so at a certain level,
I could never have predicted just about anything.
Exactly. So it's just negative emotional masturbation. Like, it's just you masturbate and feel worse at the end because you imagined everything that was horrible, and then you know that it's probably not going to work because you don't know, and so you just spend all this time, energy, and you just don't know, and you make the decision. So you make the decisions on the fly. I like to talk about the metaphor of or think about the metaphor of going west. And so I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you before, but there was of course the saying, "Go west, young men, for fortune lie." I always think that, like, the people in New York City, when they were thinking about going west, I mean, they didn't have flights. They had no idea what west was. They didn't have color photographs. And so they were like, "Oh, the streets are paved with gold, virgins everywhere," whatever they said. But they had this vision of what west is. And all they really knew about west is that it wasn't north, south, or east. And so they just got in their wagons and they started heading west. And some of them got to, like, St. Louis and saw the river, and they're like, "Oh, this is perfect. This is what west looks like. I love this. I'm going to stay here." And some went to Kansas and they're like, "Oh, fields, west. I love west." And some got to Montana and like, "No, mountains, that's west." And some got to California, like, there's nothing else to do, so this must be west. But what the thing that they had was they had a direction. And I think the direction's hugely important, but the notion that you can plan for what are you going to do in the West when you're in New York City is just absurd. You'll never know what West is. You can only recognize West once you get West. And so for you, like I've known you long enough to know that like taking care of your kids is hugely important. And so having the focus of, is this going to get me closer to taking care of my kids or not? That's a really important question.
Or I guess also it heightens like you said earlier, it heightens the importance of these relationships. So I might not call my kids today, for instance, but heightening it just a little, I will call my kids today. So the direction sort of intensifies a little bit.
Yes.
I think. And I think what is applicable is intensifying those directions, because we really don't know. I mean, you might know, and so that's intensified this direction for you of relationships. But I think it's important to always intensify them. You can't say, oh, this Friday I'm going to do something I don't want to do because I always have next Friday.
Right.
Better to intensify every moment. And then there's that cliche, like live life like it's your last. I'm not sure that's a good cliche either, because that could be taken in a lot of different ways. But let's just take it in this way. In a positive way, you should almost live life like today's your last Friday or.
Yeah, no, excuse me. I totally agree with that. I think there's two things there is that if you really live today like it's your last, you end up mortgaging your future. You make decisions. If I really thought I was going to die tomorrow, I would just go immediately max out my credit card. I don't know what I would do, but I mean, like literally, if I thought I was dying tomorrow, I would go out and have very reckless behavior in the next 24 hours.
Right.
And then to your point, when it turns out I probably don't die tomorrow, then tomorrow I'd be like, oh man, that's gonna suck, and now I have to deal with the ramifications of that. And so, I really believe in not mortgaging your present for the future and not mortgaging your future for the present, because all we really know that we have is today. But if I'm really present today, then you can't go out and do something that will harm your children 10 years from now and be happy about it today.
Right.
And so if you're really present to what you want today you do want your kids to be happy 10 years in the future. And so that allows you to balance that out a little bit. But focusing on, oh my God, 10 years in the future, what's going to happen? You have no idea, and I have no idea.
So let's say, you've been under the gun with this almost literally for these 3 years, and thank God all these different drugs have worked, and now you're in this new drug protocol, and then hopefully there'll be a new one discovered. This is a weird question, and we've talked about it in this past. But at some point, do you want it do you think there'll ever be a point where, let's say they find a drug that, okay, this one might last 48 months for you. Would that be a little bit of a drag? That's a long time now.
No, it's an interesting question. And I don't know, there's no easy answer to it.
Because the obvious answer is, of course, you want to live as long as possible. But is there some nuance
well, so
there?
like when I was on, and the answer is it depends. When I was on the last medication at the peak dose, when I had the greatest side effects, I was just like, I can't do this.
What were some of the side effects?
Tremendous nausea, tremendous fatigue. Couldn't eat anything. I was losing a huge amount of weight. Everything tasted bad. As I said, I was too tired when people came over. I couldn't pay attention. I was just constantly uncomfortable. Lots of cramping too. That's actually I still have some cramping, but I don't really understand why, but you just get these wake up in the middle of the night, just in excruciating pain for an hour, and there's just nothing you can do about it.
Where?
Generally in the legs, but it could be anywhere. And so, and I don't have that level of pain right now, but when that was going on, if this is the rest of the life, then there's just no point to doing this. And then at the second level of dose, it was very much like, I don't know. I don't know. At some point, I may just decide to stop doing this. It wasn't like I felt like I had to, but there's that sense that if you believe. It's an interesting thing. So so I have to digress for just 1 second. Is that having a really short fuse is unbelievably easy, and so much stuff that you worry about just goes away. You're asking dating. well, you can't have a really serious relationship in 6 months. And so if you're going to be dead in 6 months, you don't worry like, oh, am I ever going to get married? You don't even think about it. You're just like, nope, not going to do that. And so there's so much stuff that I and even still, I don't have to worry about. And I'm very thankful for that in a lot of ways. And, starting about a year ago and even now, a year later, they keep extending the timeline. And so like my fuse keeps getting longer and longer. And it's harder and harder not to get anxious about stuff. And so, I have that anxiety developing a little bit these days. I still largely fight through it because it's still enough stuff to remind me that, that I'm sick and that I have a short fuse, that I can't forget it. But it's also really easy for me to be like, oh man, if I last 3 years, crap, I might run out of money. What am I going to do then? And then I think, who cares? Celebrate because it's only good news if I run out of money. And I feel like I didn't answer your question.
No, that does.
And so, but do I want, at least once a week, there's a moment when I just think, it'll be nice when this is finally over.
And I mean, part of that is, do you get depressed if there's news of a new drug that could extend?
I get anxious. I don't get depressed. I get anxious,
because like the money, the relationships, or will the drug work or not? Like what part makes you anxious?
Future. Like this is totally cliche, but like, so the summer was interesting because this summer there were a couple of different choices that I had to potentially make. And there was a lot of test results coming out. And at the beginning, at one point they were considering putting me on a stage 1 trial. And these are the riskiest of trials. And there's a good chance they completely don't work. Stage 1 is mainly designed to test toxicity and does the drug work at all? Not how well does it work, just like does it even do anything and will it kill you? But of course, the stage 1 drug is the early, that's the magic bullet that you're hunting for too. So you don't really want to do a stage 1 trial. But the thing is that I couldn't do after this drug, I probably don't qualify for any stage 1 trials because after 2 of the drugs, now I'm not a clean sample. And so, the summer was like, do a stage 1 now or never do it. And if I do the stage 1, then it takes about 4 months to discover it doesn't work, if it doesn't work. And in 4 months, my brain metastasis grows so fast when I'm unmedicated that in 4 months, that could do really significant damage. Or it could actually be phenomenal. Now, ultimately, the doctors decided that they actually just wouldn't even let me do it because they thought it was too risky. But at one point, I'm looking at these things. I'm trying to decide, do I try to go for the magic bullet, with the knowledge that it could really significantly impact me?
Would you call the research scientist who made the drug and ask like for what's his philosophy behind how he made the drug?
Interestingly enough, I wouldn't, but a good friend of mine worked in the technical part of cancer research and knows a lot of the teams. And he was like, I'm going to call. He's like, as soon as they tell you the drug names, I'll call the teams and find out what they think about it. But so like I'm very mathy. I'm very kind of geeky in the way I think about stuff. And so, in August, we just even when we decide not to do the the clinical trial, we've got 2 drugs, one with a 60% chance of working and one with a 50% chance of working. And so what I know is that, if we make a 2x2 quadrant, there's a 30% chance neither drug works. And so in August, I'm aware that there's a 1 in 3 chance that I've got about 4 to 6 months of high quality life left. And, what sort of plans can I make when I don't know that? And if I don't, if it doesn't work at all, I'm just a few months away from, physical surgeries, potentially in a wheelchair, potentially in a hospital bed. And so there's no ability for your brain to even think about, what would I do? Now, unfortunately, I'm in the, right now the good half quadrant. So we've definitely pushed that off, a 1, 2, 2.5 years, however long we've pushed it off. We've pushed that off for a while. But so it's really difficult to make plans when it's so dynamic. The volatility of, literally, I mean, even as I'm saying this, I know that there's about a 20% chance that in 2 weeks I'll be told that it's not working in the brain. And then that takes us down a totally different fork. And
so there's kind of these periods of like, no news is good news. And then there's suddenly these periods of like serious decision making where you have to like build these quadrants and figure out these odds and so on.
Yeah.
And that changes everything.
Well, it's not even so much that there's that much decision making, there's just that much outcome variability. And there's a lot of decisions. And most of the time, the doctors are like, we'd like for you to do this if that's okay. And then you're like, well, what happens if I don't? And then they're like, your brain will explode. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll do what you said then. And that sounds like
yeah, brain exploding doesn't sound good.
They didn't actually say that, but
So in the U.S. is the best. What I always think of as the best cancer centers in the world was just Sloan Kettering and MD Anderson. But is that not true?
3 best cancer centers in the world, hands down: Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, and Institut Gustave Roussy in Paris.
I see. So that's the one you go to.
That's the one I go to. The difference is my total out-of-pocket costs per year range generally about 100 to 150 euros per year. So less than $200 a year.
Wow.
For some reason, I don't know why, the French government will not pay for magnesium pills. And so I have to buy I take magnesium twice a day.
For what?
That's actually part of the cramping we were talking about before.
You know what? I've been told magnesium's good for cramping because I get sometimes cramps. And
magnesium is great for cramping.
Why is that?
I have no idea, but I literally, if I take no magnesium, I will not be able to walk. I will be in pain, tons of times. Like I'll laugh and then a muscle in my rib cage will freeze up and then I can't, it's in like inside the rib cage, so I can't stretch it. It's excruciating. I take 2 of the slow release magnesium pills per day, and now it's very small and very manageable.
How many pills a day do you take overall?
20-ish.
20-ish.
Yeah.
And do you take any painkillers?
Not now. I've taken a lot of painkillers. I have all the good painkillers, but
why didn't you drop them off last time we saw each other?
You hadn't bought me dinner yet. We'll see now that you've bought me dinner.
So, Mike, your party's going to be in January.
The party's going to be in January.
What day?
January 9th to 14th.
All right, maybe I should go over to France.
Definitely go over to France.
I haven't been to France in, I don't know, I guess close to 20 years.
I mean, it's a little way, it's far away from 79th Street. But
I know, I'm going to have to leave my block. I don't usually leave my block. I'm afraid of that now. But, Mike, thanks for coming on and sharing all this stuff. And of course, it's obvious, but good luck on whatever counts for luck from this point.
Yeah.
What is good luck for you right now? Presumably that it doesn't go to the brain. That's the first piece of good luck.
I honestly, James, I don't care what happens on that front. It's the ride. I really, it's something that I find hard to explain to people, but I'm completely at peace with the fact that I die. And I actually, going back to something you were saying before, is that I wish other people were at peace with the fact that they're going to die. Because I really think that knowing that and even quantifying it a little bit is makes you make better decisions. I think it makes you live a better life.
I think that's really true. And also I think it's really hard to think that way. Because the brain, look, that's why it's almost a Darwinistic thing, is the people who didn't think that way lived and had kids. And, if somebody thought always like, I'm not going to live, so I'm not going to have kids, that group of humans died off without.
I don't mean that. Like, I don't think, think about your death imminently. But like, you mentioned a couple of times the number, you live 2,500 weeks.
Right.
Statistically, you've got about 2,000 of them left. And you're probably going to work 1,800 of them or so, maybe 1,600 of them. And I've mentioned this to you before, but like, if you only had $2,000 in the bank, you would be totally cognizant of everything that you spent the money on. But almost everyone will just be like, I don't know, this boyfriend, this girlfriend, I'll deal with it next month. And It's like you just spent 4 more weeks that you will never ever get back. How long did we both stay at HBO maybe I shouldn't say that on air, but how much you stay there loathing it. And
you a lot longer than me.
Yeah, well, you were smart. You got out, and but you hated it for a long time too.
Yeah.
You were just scheming to get out faster.
Right,
and,
right. Scheming is the right word.
You had a much better exit strategy than I did. I just waited till I got fired. You waited until you made a lot of money. But I mean, it's like how long will we wait? It's like how many Friday nights will we stay at home until we realize we don't have any more Friday nights? And that's the thing. It's not that I think life has tremendous meaning and tremendous opportunity, and it's we make decisions out of fear because we're afraid of something that there's no reason to be afraid of. Like when you think about what actually happens, that's going to happen. Like you're going to die. What the hell are you afraid of? It doesn't really. And so I think that I think that if you just recognize how precious the time that you have on life on the planet is, you just live a better life. And it's the opposite of nihilism. It's like this is, again, huge cliche, but I really feel it. Every day is a gift. And I'm very aware that at any given moment, there are an infinite number of things I could be doing other than this. And so, there's a bunch of things I could have done before other than this podcast. But the podcast is what I wanted to do the most. And so I chose to do that because that's what I'm going to spend my time doing, is the things that are important to me.
Well, I'm super grateful you are doing the podcast. What are you doing the rest of today?
I actually don't know yet. To that point, I've actually got some plans that I'm like, I don't really know if I want to do those plans. So we'll see what I end up doing. Maybe I'm having coffee with you. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. All right. Well, Mike Van Cleave, I don't know what to say. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to my conversation with Mike. It was a really important podcast for me for a lot of reasons, but I hope in some ways you benefit from it, learn something from it, and that it's just as meaningful for you in your own way as it is for me. Mike and I also talk about the science of cancer, his medical treatments, the drugs they're testing, and all the advances they're trying to make in medicine to help people suffering from thyroid cancer. You can keep listening now to hear that conversation and learn more about the science and the biology of thyroid cancer. It's not just about thyroid cancer, but all types of cancer. I really recommend it. And if you like this show, I hope you'll subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. When you subscribe, it helps other people find the show more easily. Thanks a lot.
There's a treatment. It's very technical and not that interesting. Thyroid is the only tissue in the body which retains iodine. And so they can then target radioactive particles to the thyroid cancer. And 1% of the situations, the thyroid morphs enough to where it no longer absorbs iodine. And so if you were in that 1%, and I always like to be in the top 1%,
you're a success.
I'm huge, yeah.
You're a 1%er,
I'm
man.
a 1%. I don't mean to brag, but I'm in the 1%.
Yeah.
And so anyway, if you have that, then that treatment no longer works, and then you're just a normal cancer. And so then you have back to the untreatable stuff. And that was about 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago. They told me that it was now called iodine refractory. And so when that happened, I knew that there was only about a 14-month window on average.
So wait, so 3 months ago.
No, 3 years ago.
3 years ago, sorry. 3 years ago. So 7.5 years ago, thyroid cancer, cured it, somewhat cured it.
Yeah.
But then 3 years ago, what happened? Were you feeling like pain somewhere?
No, it was, in fact,
was like a regular checkup?
It was a regular checkup, and it was the last checkup until they said, you're in remission, you're good to go. And they were already saying stuff like, don't worry, this is not going to kill you. You're going to die of something else. And so it was the very last test. And then they did that test in August, and there was a tiny bit of progression. And they thought it was coming from a lymph node, which had a slight amount of metastasis at the 3.5 years earlier.
So just because I'm totally naive about all this, when they say a tiny bit of progression, they're seeing some cells that are kind of look odd. They're mutating, so they don't look like different. They don't look like the other cells in the area.
Kind of. All right. So I mean, it's It's funny because I know a lot about this subject, obviously, and I could spend the entire podcast just talking about that, and I'd be mostly wrong because I'm not a doctor, but I understand it well enough.
Doctors are probably mostly wrong anyway. So.
Probably, yeah. They took my thyroid out, and so I have no thyroid. The cancer
Which
cells.
thyroid is like kind of one of those things like the appendix, sort of semi-useless or no?
No, completely useful. The thyroid creates hormones that are then used to create other hormones. And so all the hormones, a lot of the chemicals in your body are produced from the building blocks the thyroid makes. Now, the good news is you can just take thyroid hormones every day, and then you're totally fine. And so it's a very manageable thing, yeah.
And the body doesn't then get used to those drugs and stops making the hormones?
Well, no, I don't have a thyroid, so I can't make the hormone.
Right. So with the drugs, you have to take more and more, or like?
No. It's just you have to have a certain amount of the thyroid hormones. They're called the thyroid creates 3 hormones: T1, 2, and 3. So T1, T2, T3. And you need T1 and T3, and so you take it in pill form. And then
if you didn't take those drugs, what would happen?
Die in about a year and a half or something like that. Because basically, I don't really even know, but all sorts of like important things in your body would just slowly cease to function because they wouldn't have the necessary, like you wouldn't have any testosterone, you wouldn't have, I think, estrogen, but I'm not sure. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that is. Like the pituitary gland, if I understand correctly, takes the T1 and T3 and turns it into other useful things. And so eventually you would
bad things happen.
Bad things happen, yeah.
So some progression has happened. Something's leaked out of the thyroid.
So what happens is at this stage, nothing is visible on the CT scan. And so they don't know anything other than I take T1 and T3. It's a very common medicine. I actually can't remember the name of it all of a sudden. It's surprisingly nerve-wracking to have a microphone sitting in front of you
while talking about your death sentence.
Well, that doesn't bother me. It's my favorite subject almost. It's me. And so there's a byproduct in the thyroid called thyroglobulin. When it's making these hormones, it has a leftover thing called thyroglobulin, and they can measure the thyroglobulin in your body. And since I don't have a thyroid, I should have no thyroglobulin in my body. And so that thyroglobulin is the marker for is there rogue thyroid cells.
So like something slipped out when they removed the cancer from the thyroid. When they removed your thyroid, something that potentially had cancer on it slipped out.
You could look at it that way. I mean, what it really is that little thyroid cells broke off of the cancer, and then they swum around in my body until they found a place where they could land. The first one was in my lung. And so then the thyroid started growing inside of the lung. So I have a little tiny thyroid in my lung.
So does that mean then, so what's that called?
That's metastasis.
And so is that like related, or does that mean you have like a little bit of lung cancer, or is it just?
No, I have thyroid cancer in the lung. So I don't have lung cancer.
Right.
So a cancer means it's the original cells that have mutated and they're now capable of going somewhere else.
So they see a tiny bit. What's a tiny bit? Like a millimeter worth, or?
I think the lung is 4 millimeters now. The largest. So I have. I can't even count them anymore. I think I have 17 bone metastasis. The largest of those is about the size of a golf ball, or was about the size of a golf ball. That was in my lower back in one of my vertebrae.
And did you feel that?
Yes.
So that must have been painful.
That is painful, yeah. So bone. I mean, the thyroid in the bones. Your bones have the hard fibrous tissue, and then they have the marrow inside of it. And the marrow, of course, is where all the blood gets filtered and stuff. So it's a really great place for a cancer to take up home because it's so rich in nutrients inside of the marrow. And so what happens is that you start developing a thyroid inside of the bone, and as the thyroid grows, it breaks the bone from the inside. And so now most of my bones haven't broken, but they started cracking in the lower vertebra in the back. And so I've had surgeries on 3 of the vertebra where they, which is really amazing. They take a needle, thick. It's like a knitting needle, and they put it in and they inject some sort of gas like liquid nitrogen, but it's not liquid nitrogen, but it's inert, and it freezes the tumor, so it kills everything in that little ice ball. And they can make the ice ball about 1/4 of an inch to about 3/4 of an inch, and just kills all the tissue inside of there. And then they go in and they inject bone cement, which is basically just a epoxy inside of there, and fill the cavity up. And so now those are just as strong as they were before the procedure.
And so you have this session where it's almost you're almost free and clear from the old cancer. You suddenly realize you have new cancer. Does the doctor say, "Uh-oh"? Like what does the doctor say?
Well,
and just to be clear, like at that point when you came out of that doctor's office, were you given like, okay, most people in your situation have, like you say, 14 months to live, or like what's the full amount of information you have at the end of that session?
Well, it evolves over a period of time. Mm-hmm. There's a funny anecdote around that as well. So,
well, we want funny anecdotes
exactly
around this.
So when they first discover that there's elevated thyroglobulin count, what they do is, and this is how thyroid cancer is normally treated if it's radioactive. I mean, if it'll still absorb iodine, is you go into a hospital room for 3 days. They give you a tiny little radioactive iodine pill that's about the size of a baby aspirin. And then because the iodine is only absorbed by thyroid tissue, and radiation poisoning is a function of duration, distance, and power, they give you an incredibly low dosage of radiation. It swims around your bloodstream, and then when it finds thyroid tissue, it embeds in there. And so now you have, close proximity for long durations, but the rest of your organs, it just passes by. And so they get almost no radiation poisoning. And so that's how it systematically, kills everything. But now you're radioactive for a few days. And so when they did the scan after that, they do, I can't remember the name of the scan, but it's a scan where it's like a CT scan, but they're not bombarding me with radiation. They just run the sensors around me because I'm radioactive. And so then they can see wherever there's clumps, of the thyroid cells glowing. And what they could see is that there was partial response in some of the thyroid cells. And so they could see the cancer cells. They could see the cancer cell, and they could see that not all of it had absorbed the radiation, which means that it was no longer absorbing. And then they did more tests eventually and saw that there were other sites which had cancer in them, but did not pick up the iodine at all.
So if from that point you had not done any treatment, how long would you have survived?
3 to 6 months, probably.
3 to 6 months. Now it's 3 years later. So what happened? Well, it's 3 years later.
What was it? I got to tell you the funny anecdote part.
Oh yeah, tell me. Of course, we can't miss the humor.
And so I'm on the table getting the scan, and I'm really expecting this to be nothing. Like I'm 3 years into it, one thing away from it. And they do the scan, and then I go in the waiting room. This is usual, and they come back like, Mr. Van Cleave. And of course, it's in France, so it's all in French. The technicians don't speak English very well. And my French is good, but it's still a little confusing because medical terminology is medical terminology. And they're like, we one of the pictures didn't quite come out clearly. Can we just get you to come back on the table for a few minutes? And it's like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll go back on the table. Didn't really think anything about it. And then they go back on the table, and then they're like, okay, go back, and we'll send you home in a few moments. And I go back out, and about a half hour later, they're like, actually, we're really just having problems getting a good image of this one area. Could you come back? And I was like, okay. And then I start noticing that other doctors are coming in, and there's a little bit of commotion behind the in the control room. And I was like, oh, this can't be good. And then it turns out they were looking at a metastasis in my I think it was in my hip, but it was in the lower part of my body. But I knew that the testes was one of the places where it might metastasize to. Actually, I don't even know if that's true, but I believed it strongly at the time. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, they're taking pictures of the little guys. Like, oh my God, I have metastasis and it's in the little guys. And the first thing I thought of is I have three of my friends in Paris who were young women, no sexual relationship with them whatsoever. But the first thing I thought of was, got to get to a sperm bank so that if they want to use my sperm, they can get knocked up. And so the very first thing that occurred to me
was altruistic.
Was totally altruistic. But I was just like, how do I knock up my hot friends? That was the first thought that I had. And then I was like, that's a really weird thing to think about because this is clearly, a more significant thing than knocking up hot friends. But
Also, I don't know the genetics of your cancer, but maybe they might not want to be knocked up by your.
well, that's a whole nother story. I think genetics of cancer, just my own genetics, maybe maybe the question.
Do you think the kind of cancer you have is genetic?
They actually don't know, but probably not.
So do you have any reason to guess why you would get it, or just sort of random, or?
It is completely random. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. They really don't know. There's a dramatic upswing in thyroid cancers in the U.S. And worldwide, and they're not sure why. The only known risk factors of thyroid cancer are literally things like people who live near. I can't think of the name of that Soviet.
Like Chernobyl?
Chernobyl, yeah. It's like, did you live near Chernobyl? Were you in Hiroshima? Like, these are the only risk factors of thyroid cancer. But there's been, I think, a 20% increase in the last 20 years of thyroid cancer. So
you would wonder, do people in Utah or Nevada have like high risk of thyroid cancer?
Well, just the whole population's getting thyroid cancer more frequently than they used to. But there's still no known risk factors for it other than proximity to radiation.
So you're given you come. Well, okay, so wait, you finally come back and realize it's not your testes.
Right, it's not the little guys. And so then, to answer your question, there's a whole bunch of scans. They do the CT scan, then they do a PET scan, and then the first thing that I really got from the doctor was, and actually, still, if I ask the doctor this question, they always just say, "Don't know." Impossible to predict on an individual basis. And so, you and I have talked a lot about poker, same sort of thing. We know that 1 in 5 times your aces gets cracked. I have no idea whether your aces are going to get cracked this time. And so the doctors really just are very careful not to set expectations. Now, my doctors either love or hate me because I read all the medical journals. I never, ever, and by the way, anyone who's sick, I recommend you do not read patient sites for cancer because it'll just terrify you. But the medical journals, will tell you what the current state of the art of thinking is. And so anyway, I went in and I was like, so what does this mean? And she's like, well, it's really hard to say, blah, blah, blah. And so then I was like, well, as I understood it, I read the whatever journal it was, and it said this, 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 and this. And that seems like, not a very good, situation. And she kind of hemmed and hawed, and I repeated it, and she said, I don't really know what you want me to say. You understand the situation perfectly accurately. And that was kind of the most confirmation.
Confirmation of what?
That what I knew was correct, that it was a 9 to 12 month, kind of outside period.
And just to be clear, because we didn't set the stage in the beginning, you have cancer right now.
Oh yeah.
So it hasn't. Would you say it's worse now than it was then? I mean, as much as you've tried to control it?
Oh, no, it's significantly worse now. It's significantly more controlled now. So, so the thing is, there are, at the time of this, there were 2 drugs approved in Europe for the treatment of the cancer. And now there's 3.
And is it better in Europe or to be in U.S.?
It really doesn't matter for the most part.
Because the same drugs were in the U.S.?
Same drugs are worldwide. The FDA and the EMA may approve things at different rates. So, sometimes something's available in Europe, it's not available in the States, and vice versa. But if it's an effective treatment within 6 months to a year, it's available, everywhere. So it's just a matter of the bureaucracy timing. And, contrary to, I think, a lot of belief, the FDA and the EMA are both very efficient and both do it at about the same time. But there's just kind of some randomness in terms of, how long it takes to get something through.
So you went through a bunch of different drug protocols. Each one lasts how long?
Well, so the first one that I took was pazopanib. And pazopanib, on average, it works for 50% of the people, on average for 12 months.
So you were in the good 50%.
I was in the good 50%.
And 12 months later, they started seeing it was not working as well.
I was extremely lucky because, very fortunate in that I didn't start showing symptoms of growth for 24 months.
Oh, okay.
And then I was able to stay on it for about another 4 months while they figured out what the next treatment was. So I actually got, a useful 28 months out of that. And so that's, 2.5 times what they expected me to have out of that.
And so that's incredible. How often does that happen?
Probably just a few percent. It's a fairly long tail out there. Each standard deviation is about 3 months.
So that would have taken you close to like a year ago. right? So
No, I mean, actually, I just switched cancer medications about 2 months ago.
okay, and so how's that going so far? And how long is this one supposed to work? And by the
Okay.
way, to be clear, I from what I understand, these cancer drugs eliminate, let's say, 90% of the cancer, but meanwhile, the other 10% is growing, and that's why you suddenly then need a new cancer drug.
Yeah, it's actually it's actually more effective than that if they work. I mean, they may not work at all, and for like 50% of the people, it just has no effect. And then for the people that it works, it probably is because there's literally hundreds of millions, if not billions, of cancer cells because you just have a lot of cells in your body, and so it works in like 99.9% of them. But as you said, over time, that 1% that it doesn't work in keeps having and growing and growing. And eventually there's more of those than there are of the ones that it works in. And so eventually you develop what's called resistance. But it's really not resistant. It's just actually the
Right,
cells
it's not
that...
standard. It's not like antibiotic resistance.
No.
Where your body gets used to it.
No.
It's just like the cells that never were affected have continued to sort of replicate
Exactly.
themselves, and now they're the cancer in your body.
Exactly.
And they've replaced the old cancer cells in your body
That's
mostly.
exactly correct.
So then 2 months ago, they started you on a new drug that I guess was straight out of trials or straight out of experiments. And how is that going?
So far, we think very good. I'm actually just at almost 2 months. On Friday, it'll be on 2 months. So that's why I have to go back to Paris is to have some tests on Friday. And in the first 2 months, we've seen a 50% reduction in the thyroglobulin, which is the cancer marker I was describing before. So this means there's a 50% reduction in cancer activity, which means the cancer cells, the total number of cancer cells have to have shrunk by 50%.
And is it possible, could this drug work forever?
No.
So what's the likely pathway of this drug?
This drug is about 18 months for quote unquote working. And working is defined that the cancer is shrinking, which is not. And now there's another one metric called progression-free survival, which means that your cancer is stable. Now, for me, at the moment, as you can tell, I don't really have any side effects. All the side effects I have are side effects of the medication. And so stability is great for me. I mean, even though I have brain metastasis, they haven't affected anything. And so we don't really care.
As far as we know.
As far as we know. I'm as dopey as I ever was.
Right.
And so...
Have you noticed anything like some memory blackout?
No,
or
but I actually...
humor issue or...
I haven't, but honestly,
anger?
anytime I misplace my keys, I'm like, oh my God, I'm having, my brain's exploding. Like I can blame the illness for lots of stuff that then 2 days later I have, I'm just, no, that was just stupid. There was nothing to do with that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
So this drug,
and
18
so right
months,
now will be tested in November 29th, and that'll be the first PET scan I've had, and that will tell us where it's working in the body. So the real question now is, we know that we have a reduction in tumor mass, and the medication is most likely to work in soft tissue, then it's most likely to work in bone, and it's least likely to work in brain. And now I had a lot of bone pain by the end of the summer as the last medication quit being effective, and I have no bone pain right now. So there's a very good chance that all the bone metastasis is working. So that really takes about 80% of the badness off the table. We still don't know whether it'll work in the brain because of the brain-blood barrier, and so we'll find that out on November 29th.
And what happens in 18 months?
Well, in 18 months,
Or 16 now.
or whenever it is. I mean, and by the way, that's the median. And so, if half the people last less, half the people last more. What'll happen is at some point, the cancer will just start growing again. And now it's not like when you develop resistance, as you can imagine, even though it is a logarithmic or exponential function, since it's dividing. It still takes a long time to overwhelm. And so it's not like a light switch or something. Just slowly.
It starts small and
Right.
it's got to build.
Exactly.
It's like 1 grain of rice on the first piece, set 2 grains of rice before, but then 20 later, it's huge.
Exactly. It's like mold in your refrigerator. All of a sudden you're just like, what the hell happened? It's only been a week. But for a long
I'm
time,
not eating dinner at your apartment.
you should
obviously,
not.
anytime
You should not.
soon.
No,
So-
I don't really cook anymore. But actually, my apartment's just filled with cheese, so that's mold anyway. So
I didn't know that. So, whenever this drug stops to work, what happens next?
then there's one more drug, which is approved right now, and that's that drug only works on average for 50% of the people, and on average for 6 months. And so
That's why they haven't used it with you yet, because it's sort of like the least.
it's the worst drug. Yeah, it's the least effective in thyroid cancer, and it's also the least effective in suppression. So the one I'm on right now is awesome. So there's a caveat in there, is that there is a clinical trial which is scheduled to start soon in the U.S. France, the hospital I go to, is enrolled in that trial as well. And so there's a good chance by the time this would quit working that I could get into that trial. And that trial is to use this medication plus a biologic agent, which is a different type of treatment. And that treatment is very experimental, but they've shown about an additional 6 months in the early stage trials with this biological.
What's a biological agent?
So the therapy that I currently have, I don't know if you remember, I talked about it last year. It's complicated, but it's called small molecular therapy. And so they can, every cell in your body is made up of a certain number of proteins, and they can mathematically model what the shape of the vascularization port is. And so your cells have a hole in the middle of them, which blood goes into, and then you get the osmosis of the nutrients and the oxygen and all of that stuff. The small molecule therapy is they actually design a non-soluble molecule that plugs up that port. And so it's just literally like they're just putting corks in all of these cancer cells, and they just die of starvation. And that's actually how this medication works.
Well, that's fascinating. They even invented that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's subvisible, and so it's all done through mathematical modeling of the likelihood, because they know. So my particular one is called.
Can they ever make, like, I don't know, robots the size of cells that just go through and like find all the cells and patch them up?
I mean, that's the science fiction, the nanotech stuff. I don't know that they're nowhere close to doing something like that. And so anyway, so the small molecular therapy, there's only and I don't remember the exact number. I think it's around 45 proteins in your body that are used to create every cell in your body. And then a subset of those, and I think that number's around 10 to 15, are called the kinase proteins. And the kinase proteins are used in like really high growth applications, like making hair or skin pigmentation, and also fingernails and cancer, because the cancer is really fast growing. So there's a lot of kinase proteins inside of the cancer. And so what they can do is take these proteins and then figure out what the shape, because they're like Legos. I mean, the proteins are always the same shape. And so they mathematically figure out what could the shape of that port be once you combine those proteins. And so then they try to plug that up. And so each of these 3 medications is just a slightly different shaped non-soluble molecule. And since they can't block 100% of the ports, then again, as we just said, the 1% or the 0.5% or whatever that's not blocked eventually overwhelms it. And then you try the next drug and try to block that up.
So let's look at like a best case scenario.
Right.
So 16 months is the median of the drug you're currently on.
Yeah.
So let's just say 24, 30, 32 months.
24, yeah, probably.
24 months is the possibility. Mm-hmm. And then this next trial is 6 months, but that's like a median. So let's say 12 months. So then you're looking at like 36 months. And then you're going to really hope that there's another drug that's in trials or something that we don't even know exists yet.
Right.
And so otherwise, you're looking at a maximum of 3 years.
That's about right, yeah.
And what happens then? Like your cancer will be spreading. There's no way to stop it. Can they go back to old drugs and see if those work?
No, I mean, really, honestly, really bad things happen. They will revert to surgical procedures.
To kind of scrape out cells that look bad?
Yeah, I mean, so as I said, in this current drug, about 80% of the really bad is off the table. If there is no efficacy in the brain, they'll keep doing radiation treatments. And they do these 3-dimensional radiation treatments where they have a couple lasers that rotate around your head and shoot radiation beams in your head, and they can target an area as small as 2 millimeters. And so they can really precisely place that. And because they're going around your head in a circle and they never cross the same path, it's a little bit like, a bicycle wheel. You can't see the outer spokes because they've moved so fast, but at the hub, it looks like it's standing still. So they concentrate all the energy that way. So there's very little radiation on the side. So they'll start doing that, and that's very effective. But at a certain point, you reach the maximum amount of radiation the brain can have, and then the brain just starts developing other sorts of radiation-related problems.
Like what?
It's radionecrosis. And so wherever these laser beams go, you have dead tissue in your body. That dead tissue can become infected.
And so how long can you do these radiation treatments on the brain?
I don't even know. I mean, I know there's no direct answer. It depends on the total duration and power of the radiation beams. So I can't remember. It's I think microcuries is the unit of measurement. I actually shouldn't even say that. I have no idea what the unit of measurement is, but I know that the number is around like 100, and you can't have more than 100 units until you'll develop leukemia or some sort of other hideous thing. So they'll start with the radiation treatment, then they'll finally go to surgical procedures where they actually just go in and cut out the cancer cells. But eventually it just becomes whack-a-mole because it develops very fast. And so then, there's kind of two choices for me. Both are really unpleasant. I'll either have massive brain failure or I will have spinal failure. And that really just means that my spine will break into pieces and I'll become paralyzed and eventually the, organs and stuff will shut down because it'll kill the nerves. And so I'll die that way.
So, that's all fun.
Good morning.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.